Nigeria's return to democracy in 1999 did not begin with elections. It began with a sudden change at the top of government. The death of General Sani Abacha on Monday, June 8, 1998, brought an abrupt end to one of the most controlled military regimes in Nigerian history. Within days, the political direction of the country shifted. Policies changed, political prisoners were released, and the return to civilian rule was announced. This period marked a turning point in Nigerian history. To understand how Nigeria moved towards democracy, it is necessary to begin with the nature of Abacha's rule, the circumstances of his death, and the uncertainty that followed immediately after. General Sani Abacha came to power on November 17, 1993 after a period of political instability. Before his takeover, Nigeria had attempted an expensive transition to civilian rule under General Ibrahim Babangida, but that process collapsed following the annulment of the June 12, 1993 presidential election. The country entered a crisis. An interim national government was formed, but lasted only 82 days before Abacha seized power. From the beginning, the Abacha regime was firmly controlled by the military. Political activities were banned and opposition voices were stifled. The government ruled by decrees, which meant that laws could be made without public debate or approval from any elected body. Civil liberties such as freedom of speech and freedom of the press were weakened. Many journalists, activists, and politicians were arrested, detained, or even killed. One of the defining features of the Abacha regime was the detention of political opponents. Notably, Chief Moshood Kashimawo MKO Abiola, widely believed to have won the annulled June 12, 1993 presidential election, was arrested after declaring himself the commander-in-chief. He remained in detention throughout Abacha's rule. Other figures including former military leaders like retired generals Olusegun Obasanjo and Shehu Musa Yar'Adua and some pro-democracy activists were also imprisoned. The regime also faced strong criticism both within Nigeria and internationally. Human rights organizations accused the government of abuses, including unlawful detentions and suppression of dissent. Nigeria became increasingly isolated from the international community. Several countries imposed sanctions, and Nigeria was suspended from organizations such as the Commonwealth of Nations. Economically, Nigeria experienced mixed conditions. While the country earned revenue from oil, there were widespread allegations of corruption and mismanagement of public funds. Infrastructure development was limited, and many Nigerians faced economic hardship. The gap between the government and the general population widened. By the late 1990s, Abacha began a political transition program. However, this program was widely criticized. Political parties that emerged during this period appeared to support Abacha himself as a civilian president. This raised concerns that the transition was designed to keep him in power rather than return the country to genuine democracy. However, on June 8, 1998, General Sani Abacha died suddenly in Abuja. His death came as a shock to the nation. There had been no clear indication that such a change was imminent. As a result, the event created immediate uncertainty within the government and across the country. The official announcement stated that he died of natural causes. However, due to the secrecy that surrounded his regime, many Nigerians questioned the circumstances of his death. Different rumors circulated, but no widely accepted alternative explanation was confirmed. What remained clear was that the head of state was gone without a clear, publicly known succession plan. In military governments, leadership transitions are often tightly controlled. However, sudden deaths can disrupt this order. In Abacha's case, senior military officers quickly moved to stabilize the situation. Within a short time, General Abdulsalami Abubakar, the erstwhile Chief of Defense Staff, was announced as the new head of state. This rapid decision helped to prevent an immediate power struggle within the military. Abacha's death also had important political consequences. It created an opportunity for change. Many Nigerians hoped that the new leadership would move the country away from military rule and towards democracy. The death of Abacha removed a central figure who had been associated with political repression and stalled transition efforts. At the same time, the situation remained uncertain. The policies and intentions of the new government were not yet clear. Would the military remain in power, or would it hand over to civilians, especially Chief Abiola, who was still in detention? Would political prisoners be released? Would a credible transition program be introduced? These questions became central in the days and weeks following Abacha's death. At the time of Abacha's death, Abiola had been in detention for about 4 years. He had declared himself president on June 11, 1994 and was arrested soon after. Despite repeated calls for his release from civil society groups, foreign governments and international organizations, the Abacha regime had refused to free him. His case had, therefore, become both a domestic and international concern. With Abacha gone, expectations rose immediately that the new military government would act quickly to resolve the issue. However, the situation was not straightforward. Releasing Abiola without conditions raised political and legal questions. Would he assume the presidency based on the 1993 election? Would this disrupt the military's control of the transition process? On the other hand, continuing to detain him risked undermining the credibility of any proposed return to civilian rule. The new government had to balance stability within the military, public expectations, and international pressure. General Abdulsalami Abubakar signaled early that he intended to move Nigeria towards democracy within a short period. This position increased the urgency of resolving Abiola's status. The government began to consider options that would allow a transition without reopening the full constitutional crisis of 1993. One approach was to secure Abiola's release on the condition that he would not insist on claiming the presidency. This reflected a broader strategy of negotiated transition rather than direct restoration. At this stage, international actors became more directly involved. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, played a quiet but important diplomatic role. He supported efforts to encourage dialogue between the Nigerian government and Abiola. His position reflected the wider international view that Nigeria needed a peaceful and credible transition, and that the continued detention of Abiola was a major obstacle. In addition to the United Nations, the United States government showed strong interest in the situation. American diplomats engaged with Nigerian authorities as well as with Abiola's representatives. Among them was Thomas Pickering, who visited Nigeria as part of efforts to support the transition process and to find a quick resolution to the Abiola issue. Abiola was persuaded to accept a political compromise and give up his mandate in a public statement that would set aside his claim to the Nigerian presidency. Such a statement would allow the transition program to proceed without legal or political complications arising from the June 12, 1993 annulled presidential election. For the Nigerian government, this approach offered a way to move forward while avoiding confrontation with Abiola's supporters. But Abiola was adamant. It was his mandate or nothing. At this juncture, the problem had reached a critical point and was becoming a cog in the wheel for the new military regime. So, on July 7, 1998, Chief MKO Abiola met with a group of foreign diplomats, including representatives of the United States. The meeting was part of the ongoing negotiations concerning his release and the terms of a possible settlement. However, during or shortly after this meeting, Abiola suddenly fell sick and died. His death created immediate shock and confusion. Just a month after the death of General Sani Abacha, Nigeria now faced the loss of the man widely regarded as the symbol of its democratic struggle. The circumstances of Abiola's death quickly became a subject of public debate. While official accounts described a heart attack and no foul play, many Nigerians questioned what had happened, especially given the presence of foreign diplomats at the time. The involvement of international figures, including those connected to Kofi Annan and the United States, added another layer to the controversy. Some observers speculated about the role of these actors, although no conclusive evidence was produced to support claims of wrongdoing. However, Abiola's death quickly ended the immediate question of whether he would be released to assume office or participate in a negotiated settlement. In this sense, it resolved the confusion, but in a tragic and sad way. The focus of the transition then shifted from restoring the June 12 mandate to organizing new elections that would establish a new civilian government for the Fourth Republic. For General Abdulsalami Abubakar, this development removed a major obstacle to the transition program. The government proceeded with plans for elections, leading to the inauguration of a civilian president in a former head of state, retired General Olusegun Obasanjo, on May 29, 1999.